If you want to unlock the hidden depths of human behavior and gain unparalleled insight into the minds of others, then keep reading. This groundbreaking guide combines the power of dark psychology, NLP techniques, body language analysis, and more to help you decode people's intentions, motives, and emotions like never before.
Hello, this is Eric Holt, and you are listening to How to Analyze People. Read people like a book with dark psychology secrets, NLP techniques, body language analysis, enhanced emotional intelligence, and expert-level manipulation skills provided to you by United Audiobooks. I hope you enjoy my audiobook. Now, let us begin.
Introduction. Do you want to know the secrets to analyze people using dark psychology? While reading and analyzing people may sound unethical, it can also be a fascinating and useful skill that you can use in your everyday life. Some may look at the entire act of analyzing people as menacing and creepy, but having this skill can definitely do you a lot of good. It is a sort of defense for you and your loved ones. Honing this skill also contributes to your self-improvement and career advancement. Basically, the act of analyzing people involves interpreting nonverbal and verbal cues. You can use it in seeing beyond the masks worn by people, thereby letting you see who they really are. It allows you to go beyond logic as it will not give you the entire story of anyone. It is important for you to be willing to surrender to important forms of information, which is a big help in reading crucial nonverbal and intuitive signals given off by those around you. To analyze people, you should be willing to surrender all your preconceptions as well as emotional baggage, like ego clashes and past resentments. You have to be objective and neutral as you receive information so you won't end up distorting it. While the process of reading and analyzing people seems complex, you will be able to learn it with the right guide. This book, How to Analyze People, will be your ultimate guide in learning how to use dark psychology in analyzing people. It provides comprehensive information about the subjects, plus offers tips for using them responsibly and without losing your sense of morality. After reading this book, you will be more enlightened on the basics of analyzing and reading people. You will also discover how to use this skill without harming those around you. Understanding human behavior. What makes people tick? When you hear the phrase analyzing people, you may immediately look at it as the process of reading minds and body signals. However, that particular notion oversimplifies the process as it does not only involve reading the thoughts of others. What you do is that you get information from them, specifically those that you can use in swaying interactions in any direction. Instead of reading thoughts, analyzing people allows you to gauge their personality, motivation, and other important tidbits of information based on the way they behave. It requires you to not only talk to a person but observe subtle clues that will help you identify what makes them tick specifically. With the help of this technique, you will uncover the real personality of anyone. This means you get the chance to delve deeper, allowing you to see what's inside of them aside from what they put out in public. Dark psychology defined. As the name suggests, dark psychology is all about studying the dark side of people. It is a collection of somewhat illicit techniques. In the most extreme cases, when you use dark psychology, you can potentially make people question their own mentality. This means you can possibly push someone to despair, which is why dark psychology can be a dangerous weapon if used by the wrong people. What you should just remember is that you can use dark psychology to gain as much information about people as possible. Be prepared to experience some difficulties and challenges when trying to learn this skill, though. It's a slippery slope. If you are not careful, your moral compass may end up being irreparably ruined or skewed. Why is it important to analyze people? Do you think it is worthwhile to learn how to analyze people? The answer is yes. Here are several reasons why you have to consider honing your ability to analyze people and what it can do for you. Helps unmask dishonesty. Do you have the tendency to trust people and the words they say easily? Does this kind of trust cover apply even to people you just met? If that's the case, you may want to hone your skills in analyzing people to know if they are indeed worthy of your trust. This does not necessarily mean that you should always suspect that people are lying to you. What's important here is to determine who amongst those you interact with you can trust completely. It allows you to detect the honesty of those around you as they interact with you. You will essentially be always a step ahead of anyone whom you are having a conversation with. It will make you almost impervious to any attempts at deception. Improves conversation skills. You don't necessarily need to use dark psychology for this. Just knowing how to analyze people to translate and understand verbal and nonverbal cues that usually come up in all conversations is enough. As mentioned earlier, most cannot express their actual thoughts through their words. A lot of nuances get lost if you do not read the person's expressions and tone of voice. Analyzing people is not just a way to get under their skin. You can also use this skill to understand what they are saying, thereby providing them with an acceptable reply. This will make you much better at holding conversations and keeping them interesting. Boost your self-confidence. Are you overly self-conscious? Do you worry about how others perceive you? If your answer is yes, you can increase your self-confidence just by analyzing people so you can easily gauge if your negative thoughts about your self-image are warranted. If you know that you can somewhat unmask people's true behavior and intentions, you will feel more confident when it comes to interacting with them. Your confidence will be bolstered, knowing that you can detect how genuine those around you are. Increases your charisma. How does analyzing other people help boost your charisma? It does so because it transforms you into a better conversationalist. The reason is that it makes you more adept in giving the appropriate response in every conversation. With dark psychology, you can somewhat guide anyone to agree with you, and they won't even notice what you've done. Charisma is when you can convince people to your side, even when you start as enemies. As you analyze them, you will know what they like and what they need to hear to make them like you. Helps keep you safe. Analyzing people can help keep you safe most of the time. One reason is that it allows you to avoid those who have bad intentions. It allows you to use the same techniques that law enforcers use to gauge the threat levels of perpetrators. Once you notice and sense any hostility for those who are close, you can immediately escape from that setting. But how about if the person is already in your face and actively stirring up a conflict? If you cannot flee from the encounter, you can use dark psychology to further analyze them and manipulate the encounter to de-escalate the situation quickly. It gives you enough time to study and confuse them while developing the best escape plan through your mind. Makes you a better negotiator. You will become a much better negotiator if you know how to analyze people. Let's say, for example, you were shopping for a used car. This skill is a big help at spotting the manipulation tactics used by most car salesmen. It also helps you protect yourself against them. Also, if you master the technique, you can use the same tactics against the person, but with such subtlety that they won't know what you just did. This makes it useful even on swindlers and scammers who are trying to fool you. You will have a more successful career. Do you always have trouble asking for a pay increase? Then analyzing people can be of help to you. By honing this skill, you will be able to know your worth and approach the right people that can help give you a more flourishing career. With dark psychology, you can see through people's deception, and you will be more or less immune to gaslighting and other manipulation techniques. You can immediately detect if there is indeed a chance for career advancement in the specific field you are in right now. If there isn't, then you can immediately get out and make one for yourself. Important things to be wary of. Now, are there drawbacks to using dark psychology in analyzing people? The answer is yes. While there are good sides to this skill, be ready to face its downsides too, which usually include the following. Potential damage to your mental health. Analyzing a person's behavior may cause you to develop a jaded perception of humanity and even paranoia. The reason is that this skill may cause you to uncover every dark aspect of human behavior, which may end up in you feeling like everyone's out to get you. It is important to be mentally stable and strong to deal with the challenges you may experience during this journey. Also, accept the fact that everyone has a dark side, even you. It is just part of human nature. Learn not to judge other people too hastily and keep your biases in check. You may deal with aggression. If you're just a beginner, those you are analyzing may notice what you are doing. This can lead to animosity and often aggression. You also risk alienating yourself from your social circle if they knew about what you were doing. This is especially true even if you do not apply this skill to them, as they will start doubting your intentions and sincerity. You may lose control of your moral compass. If you wish to be skilled in analyzing people in dark psychology, you will need to have strong mental fortitude. Once you see the dark sides of people, you will feel like you are justified to antagonize them as well. Just as Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. Do not be too quick to judge people and then punish them according to your skewed sense of morality. If you are not careful, you will end up becoming an even bigger monster than how you perceive others. Key factors affecting human behavior. As you begin to study the basics of analyzing people, you will realize how different each one is based on their unique behaviors and characteristics. Just like fingerprints, you can't expect to see two people having exactly the same behaviors. This is why you should avoid generalizing, making it kind of difficult to analyze people at first. If you are really serious about learning everything about how to analyze people, you should also learn a few factors that impact the development of their behaviors, including the following: biological and physiological attributes. One factor that determines behavior is the set of hormones coursing through a person's body. For instance, men have more testosterone, so they are usually more aggressive compared to women. However, physiology can also affect hormone production. Adolescent males are more aggressive because their bodies suddenly produce more testosterone than their brains can handle. Meanwhile, older women who are undergoing menopause can also become quite aggressive and antagonistic. The reason is the imbalance of hormones brought on by the significant drop in estrogen production after reaching a specific age. Socioeconomic status. If you grew up with a lot of financial struggles, then it is highly likely that you will develop certain behavioral issues like lower self-esteem, higher aggression, depression, and anxiety. Someone lower on the socioeconomic ladder typically has higher levels of aggression and hostility and is more discriminatory. Meanwhile, those who grow up well and on top of the socioeconomic ladder are usually more sure of themselves. However, they are also the ones that are at risk of developing certain behavioral issues like narcissism and neuroticism. Culture and nationality. Your behavior may also be shaped by your cultural background. A country's culture comes with a set of unwritten rules enforced within the family and the community. Your behavior will be molded by the culture that you grew up with, as you would often consult your cultural rules on how you should react to different situations. The ethics of human analysis. Can you really be considered ethical if you use dark psychology to analyze people? This might be a hard question to answer since ethics can be subjective. However, it is important to have a set of morals to follow when you are using rather illicit means to gain information from people. Is it possible to remain ethical even if you are using rather clandestine methods to get results? In general, dark psychology revolves around studying and analyzing human behavior, especially its dark side. At its core, it is about identifying and exploiting the cracks in another person's psyche. It requires you to observe and analyze people. You will have to look for signs of weaknesses and inconsistencies that you will then weaponize against them. A lot of professionals often use dark psychological tactics to earn their keep. But the question is, Are they all inherently evil? The answer is no. While some professionals use dark psychology for selfish and evil reasons, others are responsible enough and use it only when necessary. Can you be an ethical dark psychology practitioner? Is it possible to use somewhat illicit techniques and still be ethical? Yes, you can still be ethical while towing the line of ethicality, though this is quite difficult. Dark psychology, in essence, is a tool, and tools are not inherently evil. The trouble starts when you use them recklessly and without any regard for others. In addition, not all people who use dark psychology are even aware that they are using it. With that said, who are the people who commonly use dark psychology? Lawyers. Unsurprisingly, a good chunk of the users of dark psychology are lawyers. Some attorneys rely mostly, sometimes even entirely, on dark psychology tactics to win their cases. They would even use persuasion to get the kind of answers that they need. Public speakers. Even your favorite public speaker might be using dark psychology techniques. They would sometimes use dark psychological methods to get whatever kind of reaction they want from their audiences. They would use dark tactics to get a rise from the audiences so it would be easier to sell anything to the attendees. Politicians. It is yet again unsurprising to learn that politicians are also experts at using dark psychology. Just like public speakers, politicians would use dark tactics to persuade and manipulate people into believing that they are the only ones who are worthy of their trust and votes while the others are not. Salespeople. Of course, salespeople rely on making sales to earn money, so it is only natural for them to use dark psychology to convince people that they need whatever it is they're selling. These are just some of the professions that somewhat require those in their respective fields to actively, or at least sometimes, use dark psychology methods. Arguably, most of those who use dark psychology to analyze people as their profession are not inherently evil. Some of them are even unaware that they are already utilizing it. How to keep yourself ethical when using dark psychology. Whenever you are using dark psychology to analyze people, your main goal should be to get a mutually beneficial outcome. This might be quite difficult, especially since it will be easier to just use dark tactics to manipulate the other person to get whatever you want. Humans tend to follow the path of least resistance, so doing the right things using dark methods is understandably difficult. For instance, a salesperson can truly believe that whatever it is they are selling will really help their customers. The salesperson might use dark psychology tactics to convince people to buy, but their intentions are not evil at all. But does your desired positive output justify your need to use dark psychology? Of course not. Having this mentality when analyzing people will make it easier for you to slip into the sinister side of dark psychology. It may constantly delude you to think that what you are doing is good for others when, in fact, you are causing them harm. If you want to somewhat keep your moral compass pointing in the right direction whenever you are planning to use dark psychology, ask yourself these questions. Will the tactics I'm going to use cause irreparable harm to my relationship with the other person? How do I feel about using dark psychology in this situation? Does it feel right? Or do I feel a sort of self-doubt as there seems to be something that is stopping me? What are my goals for having this interaction? Can people benefit from it? How? Will this interaction lead to long-term benefits for the other party? Am I openly honest about doing this? Am I forcing myself to justify my actions? Reevaluate the need to use dark psychology if your answers start to cause you to doubt yourself and question your moral compass. Do's and don'ts of analyzing people. In addition to evaluating your motivations for analyzing people, you need to set rules for yourself. Treat these as guidelines to help keep yourself in check so you can prevent yourself from jumping off the deep end. Do. Protect the privacy of the person you are analyzing. Whatever information you get from your interactions, make sure that you keep it to yourself. Never use any information to defame or humiliate the other person. Regardless of how others treated you, never stoop to their level and use your skills to take revenge. Strive to get the most accurate information that you can. You will risk making the wrong assessment when you stop your analysis prematurely. Yes, you have to speed up when analyzing people. However, you should strike a balance between speed and thoroughness. Otherwise, you will be sacrificing the accuracy of your analysis. Consider the person's cultural background. There are many nuances between the different cultures. Any false assumption can hamper the results. Prevent that from happening by studying various cultures thoroughly and their effects on human behavior. Don't let your personal biases affect your observations. Set your personal biases aside when you are analyzing your target. Regardless of what you personally feel towards the person, you need to ignore that for now and proceed with your analysis objectively. Fudge the numbers. Do not downplay or exaggerate whatever information you get from your target. It is unethical to add non-existing data just so the result will fit your suspicions. Discriminate or stereotype. Although you should consider the other person's culture and nationality when doing your analysis, you should not assume that they fit your perceived stereotype. Keep in mind that a person's cultural heritage only plays a part in a person's behavior. It is not the only determining factor. Misrepresent your findings. You need to present the facts you gathered as truthfully and accurately as possible. You should not lie to yourself. Do not draw connections where there are none just so you can get an answer that fits your biases. Whatever information you get, present them as is. It is easy to fall into the sinister side of dark psychology, so you will need to police yourself as no one else can do it for you. You will need a strong moral compass if you want to use dark psychology, as these methods will not just mess up the person you are using them on, but they could do the same to you.
I hope you are enjoying my audiobook so far. It would be a pleasure if you could let me know how you're feeling about this audiobook in the comments section below. We would greatly appreciate it if you could also like this video and subscribe to United Audiobooks to have access to more best-selling audiobooks in the future. Also, please, if you are interested in getting more free audiobooks, please click the first link in the description below. Now, let's carry on with the next chapter.
Reading between the lines. Decoding body language. Now it is time to learn and understand the basic techniques used for analyzing people. For this part, we will not be delving too much into dark psychology. Instead, you will be learning how to spot the subtle clues that people unknowingly put out when they are talking with others. Let's start with the first thing that most of us notice: facial expressions. Facial expressions. What your face tells about you. Facial expressions can give you telltale signs of how a person feels. You can just look at their facial expressions to determine whether they are sad, happy, or angry. This is already innate in all human beings. For instance, a smile is an obvious indicator of happiness or joy. Or is it really? Most people believe that they can already tell what other people are feeling, but when faced with someone who has decided on deceiving them, they won't be able to spot anything wrong. For instance, anyone can fake a smile, but only a few can hide what they're truly feeling. With that, you really have to be adept in spotting, detecting, and reading micro-expressions. Fleeting expressions. Catching micro-expressions. Micro-expressions are the small, involuntary facial expressions that people make when they express their emotions. Because they are involuntary moments, most people cannot control them, which means you can use them to spot basic deception. However, some people can train their facial muscles so much that they can greatly minimize their micro-expressions. You need to have a keen eye to spot micro-expressions. They are very subtle, and they typically last less than half a second. If you blink at the wrong time, you might miss them. Reading micro-expressions is an integral part of analyzing people because all humans have them, and they are used to convey the same emotions. These micro-expressions are, therefore, there to help you accurately tell what someone is feeling at a particular moment. Universal micro-expressions. Here are the signs of micro-expressions that you can use to detect emotions in people. Make sure that you are getting more than one micro-expression to confirm the emotion. Just one sign is not enough. Surprised, startled. It is when you are surprised or startled that your micro-expressions are most notable. The main reason is that there is no chance to brace yourself if you get startled. In addition, it takes a while before you can gather yourself after getting surprised, so you will have a bit more time to catch the signs. Here are the signs that you should look for if you suspect surprise. Stretched skin under the brow. Wrinkles appearing across the forehead. Fully opened eyelids. You will also notice the whites of the eyes becoming more visible. Sudden opening of the jaw without tension around the mouth. The eyebrows suddenly go up. One of the reasons why you need to spot genuine surprise is that it is the emotion used the most for deception. When someone gets accused of lying, you will know that it is not true if they show genuine surprise. However, one who is actually lying will feign surprise. Most of the time, they will exaggerate their fake surprise to really sell you into the deception. Fear. Fear is closely related to shock and surprise, meaning there will be a lot of similarities between the two emotions. You may find it challenging to distinguish the two, but with more experience, you can spot the differences. Here are the signs that you should look for if you suspect fear. Open jaw and slightly stretched and tense lips. Wrinkles appearing on the forehead but mostly concentrated in the middle. Open upper eyelids and tensed lower eyelids. The upper whites of the eyes are showing, but the lower parts are still hidden. Raised eyebrows that are also drawn together in a straight line. You need to learn how to differentiate surprise from fear because it can help detect deception. If the person is feigning surprise but you find micro-expressions that express fear, that might mean that you caught the person in the middle of a lie. The micro-expressions associated with fear are some of the hardest to suppress because they are ingrained in our DNA. A human being's fight or flight responses are triggered by fear and they are almost impossible to contain. Sadness. Just like with happiness, it is extremely difficult to feign sadness. The reason is that the micro-expressions for sadness are quite small and fleeting. You might even mistake someone's resting face for sadness. Here are the signs you should look for when you suspect sadness. The inner corners of the eyes are drawn towards the center. A slight pout in the lower lip. The skin underneath the eyebrows forms small triangles. The corners of the lips somewhat point down. Why is it important to identify genuine sadness? Because this emotion is typically used to calm down someone angry. If you are angry at someone who you know is manipulating you, they may feign sadness and gaslight you into doubting yourself. If this happens, check for the micro-expressions and call them out on their deception. However, as said earlier, even though sadness is the hardest emotion to replicate, it is also the most difficult to catch. You will need lots of thorough practice to get the hang of figuring out the micro-expressions for sadness, but it will be worth it if you want to protect yourself from manipulation. Anger. The thing with anger is that it is often hidden. People who are actually angry would try to hide their facial expressions, especially when in public situations. Why do you need to read even the slightest sign of anger? If a person has even slight animosity towards you, it also shows distrust. It may be necessary to persuade them a bit to calm down and gain their trust again. Here are the signs you should look for if you suspect anger. The eyebrows are shifted downward and drawn to the middle of the brows. Vertical wrinkles appear between the brows. Clenched jaw. A mouth is closed and the lips are pressed together. A bit strained lower lip. The eyes are staring hard. Anger is one of the easiest emotions to conceal. The main reason is that it is the most common that human beings experience. Of course, you have already experienced hiding your anger at least once in your life to avoid conflicts. On the other hand, if the anger emotion is too strong and happens fast, the micro-expressions might present themselves suddenly. Why do you need to discover fake anger? Because sociopaths use fake anger and outrage to establish dominance. One dark psychology method is to fake your anger. typically almost immediately at the start of the conversation to make the other more submissive. If you suspect that the other person is not genuinely angry, you can deploy countermeasures to prevent yourself from getting manipulated. Contempt. What is contempt? This is an emotion that is quite similar to hate, and it is the feeling of disrespect or utter dislike towards a person. Also, unlike the other micro-expressions, the ones for contempt are somewhat asymmetrical, meaning only one side of the face is engaged. Here are the signs you should look for when you suspect contempt. One side of the mouth rises briefly, one eyebrow raised. Contempt might be mistaken for disgust, but the former is more about feeling superior to someone. If the person feels contempt for you, they feel that they are in the right. So if you see this emotion, you need to tread with caution. Contempt is the most destructive emotion when it comes to relationships. If you notice this with your significant other, use whatever means you can to curb it. If you are having a conversation with someone and they immediately show signs of contempt and then switch to fake happiness, you can be sure that there is some form of manipulation happening. Happiness. Happiness is probably the most faked emotion. Many people would often fake their smiles just so they won't offend or hurt other people's feelings. Note, though, that it does not need an expert to distinguish a fake smile from a genuine one. It may only be challenging and difficult if done by a sociopath. Also, even if you try to fake a smile, there are some micro-expressions that you cannot just do at will. Here are the signs you should look for if you suspect happiness. The lower eyelids might have a couple of wrinkles or might be slightly tensed. Crow's feet at the corners of the eyes. Raised corners of the lips. Slightly raised cheeks. Slightly squinted eyes. You can use your ability to differentiate between fake and real smiles in catching people who are feigning interest and thrill so they can curry trust and then manipulate you later. Disgust. Usually, disgust is triggered whenever you encounter things that are disagreeable to you. Things that smell bad or look disgusting are not the only things that can trigger disgust. You can also feel disgust toward a person. The moment you find the micro-expressions connected to disgust, you immediately need to change your tactics or increase your persuasion to turn the tide in your favor. This also works when you are dating, and you need to find out if you have to step up your game. Here are the signs you should look for if you suspect disgust. Slightly squinted eyes. Raised corners of the nose and wrinkled top of the nose. Slightly raised cheeks. Slightly open mouth, exposing the front teeth. The thing that makes disgust one of the emotions that are hard to suppress is that it makes the feeling even worse. There was a study conducted at the University of Groningen in 2009. Here, the participants had to suppress their disgust after pictures of things that trigger such an emotion were shown to them. What happened is the more the participants tried to contain their disgust, the more their brains actually thought about even more disgusting things. It is like a vicious cycle of disgust. Techniques to find and decode micro-expressions. Focus on the key facial regions. Avoid looking at the whole face. What you should do instead is to focus from one area to another. This is to prevent the other person from sensing what you are doing right away. Focus on facial areas that give you more information, especially the eyes, brows, and mouth. Watch for even the most subtle changes, and then compile the information you can get. Establish a baseline. Before you go through data gathering, you should first establish a baseline. This is so you won't mistake a person's default facial expressions for micro-expressions. Hopefully, the person will be at their default facial expression. However, if they are not, you should manipulate the conversation to a more neutral tone so you can get a baseline. Once you have a baseline, you can easily figure out even the slightest changes. Always take context into consideration. Just reading emotions will not give you that much information. You also need to add context to the emotions. Why does your target seem upset? What did the target find amusing with what you said? Why did your target suddenly get a bit sad when you mentioned something? Practice, practice, and practice some more. You will not get good at catching micro-expressions overnight, so do not try doing it after just learning how to do it. Spend time practicing first and do it only once you are confident of your capabilities. Body postures and hand gestures, literal body language. Now that you've learned about facial expressions, the next step is to learn about how people carry themselves. Most of the time, people's body language betrays their true feelings and motives, so you should be wary of them as well. Just like reading micro-expressions, reading body language can be tricky and you will need to practice quite a lot before you can get good enough to use it practically. Here, you will receive some of the most basic tells to help you get started. How to catch positive body language. Some body language cues will let you know immediately if the intentions of someone are honest. You can also use these tips in determining whether they are trying to use persuasion and manipulation tactics on you. Take note of the eyes. Too much or too little eye contact can give negative implications. You will need to establish what is the right amount of eye contact depending on the person you are analyzing. On average, a normal person would maintain eye contact for 5 to 7 seconds at a time. This clearly indicates their interest in the things you are saying. Also, when they are talking while maintaining just the right amount of eye contact, take it as a sign of honesty. Observe the quality of the handshake. Just like with eye contact, the ideal is a medium handshake strength. The handshake should be sufficiently strong. This signifies that the person has a sense of poise and confidence. A weak handshake is a sign of nervousness or lack of self-confidence. Meanwhile, the reverse, which is a handshake that is kind of strong, indicates aggression, sometimes even power play. However, you need to take into consideration the build of the person when gauging handshakes. A handshake might seem strong to you, but it might be normal for those with a huge muscular build. Check out the posture. Observe the person's posture while they are sitting or standing. If they stand or sit with a straight and erect posture and fill the space as much as they can, it means they are trying to convey power and confidence. The shoulders should be straight, but not stiff. The head is raised, but not so much that they are trying to look down on you. The feet should be sufficiently spread apart, but comfortably. How to catch negative body language. If you spot the following posture cues, you should already put your defenses up and start carefully analyzing the person for any potential threats. Excessive nodding. Too much head nodding can mean that the person wants you to finish whatever you are saying so they can say their rebuttal. It could also mean that they lack confidence and are feeling quite nervous around you. Pair this up with other cues to find out what it really means. Too much eye contact. A liar would typically try to avoid eye contact. Note, though, that there are instances when they will do the opposite to prevent people from catching that they are lying. They may look you in the eye with the hopes of demonstrating their feigned honesty. Too much eye contact could also indicate manipulation. They may try to make you feel uncomfortable by not breaking eye contact. If you are the first one to look away, they will start on a barrage of persuasion techniques to get you to submit even further. Crossed arms and/or legs. Arms or legs crossed may signal disinterest even if the person doing it tries to deliver positive messages. It could be that they are just waiting for the right moment to speak instead of giving their full ears to you as you talk. Crossed arms and legs also subtly indicate a defensive stance. It could be an indication that they are more knowledgeable than you and are in fact waiting for the moment when you can rebuff your belief. If crossed arms are coupled with micro-expressions of contempt, prepare yourself for a bit of gaslighting. Excessive fidgeting. Glance at the person's hands. Do they fidget most of the time? It may demonstrate their lack of interest in the things you are saying. They may not be intently and actively listening to your message, too. If the person is playing with parts of their clothing, like the hems or the buttons, it can also be a sign of disinterest and they are just looking for something to preoccupy themselves. Reading facial expressions and body language is admittedly quite difficult. However, these are the most important steps in analyzing a person because they are used for gathering important data. As mentioned multiple times earlier, do not expect to be good at reading emotions and body language immediately. Practice and perfect the skills first before using it. Doing so prematurely might get you in trouble. However, once you have mastered the techniques to gather all the data you will need, the rest of the human analyzing process will be quite easier in comparison. Verbal communication. It's more than just words. There is a high likelihood for you to detect a person's personality just by talking to them. A talk with someone will enlighten you about his personality and even some things he tries to hide from others. In other words, it is possible to sense a person's lies and the reason behind the action by deciphering their words. If you want to have a higher level of accuracy when analyzing people, you have to read between the lines. Do not listen just to the words that come out of the other person's mouth. Check out whether there are subtle nuances you can use in gathering vital information. Learn to listen. The more you hear, the more you know. If you want to analyze a person verbally, you need to be an exemplary listener. Otherwise, you may miss out on several important details, including nonverbal ones. You may miss a couple of important tonal cues while your mind was drifting elsewhere. How can you catch these subtle cues? The answer is by simply being an active listener. Active listening is all about paying close attention to one's message, whether it is conveyed verbally or non-verbally. This means you are not just hearing the words but are also considering the emotions of the speaker and their body language. To become an effective active listener, you should be willing to devote yourself to the task. Improve your attention span too. In addition, you should cultivate an attitude that allows you to empathize with others. Successful active listening is composed of three main components, namely, listening to total meaning. As you listen to someone talk, expect to hear messages conveyed using actual words. This is also often accompanied by the feeling that is underlying the message. An active listener does not just focus on the verbal information conveyed by the other person. You must also take the nonverbal cues into consideration. Responding to the other person's feelings. Once the other person finishes speaking and when a reply is needed, you have to respond to their emotions as well. You should not get into a conversation just so you can argue. Use this chance to gather valuable intel from them. This means you will need to coerce the other to talk as much as possible. This way, the speaker will feel that you truly understand what they meant. This will also establish empathy and a deeper connection. Taking note of all the cues. The nonverbal cues include everything mentioned in the previous chapter. It takes all the verbal and nonverbal cues to get the entire message of the person. In addition, if the message and the nonverbal cues do not seem to match, there is a strong chance of deception. How to become an active listener. Follow these tips and you will immediately become a much better and more active listener than before. However, be diligent in practicing until you start actively listening even without thinking about it. Don't interrupt. You are trying to gather information, not win an argument. So allow someone to speak without any interruption. Listen intently to their words. Even if you want to rebut the other person, hold it in for now. The data that you are gathering is much more important than your ego. Show that you are listening. You need to keep the conversation going as long as possible for optimum data collection. So show the other person that you are listening. Every now and again, give a gentle nod to show that you are still listening. You can also say, "Uh-huh," or "yes," to demonstrate your agreement. Never look at your watch or fidget in your seat as it may indicate boredom and your desire to end the conversation. Clasp your hands together and maintain a sensible amount of eye contact. The more words the other person says, the more data you can accumulate. Do not look away. Have you ever seen psychiatrist meetings in TV shows? Why is it that the patient always lies down while the psychiatrist is sitting on a chair and looking at their notes? This is not usually what happens in a psychiatrist's office, and it should not also be the case when you are talking with someone. Face the person you are talking to, so you can show them how much you are intent on listening to them, Never make the mistake of looking away so you won't end up missing critical nonverbal cues. Don't judge. Speaking of emotions, you should hold your biases and not judge the other person. Avoid jumping to conclusions if data gathering is not yet complete. Even if you strongly disagree with the other person, hold your judgment until you have collected enough information. Judging too early will cloud your judgment, which will make you miss some important cues. Don't plan what you will be saying next. As the conversation continues, avoid thinking too much about what you should say next. Do not muddle your mind with other thoughts unless it is for gathering more data from the other person. Listening while planning what you say next will only confuse you. Don't lose your focus. You should just focus your whole attention on the other person. Do not just listen to the words, but also watch the face for any changes in expressions and any movement from the body. Do you have trouble focusing on their words? Then try to repeat each last word or phrase that they say to you. Ask open-ended questions. Your goal should be to make someone tell you a lot of things. An effective way to make them talk willingly is to ask open-ended questions, those that you cannot answer with just a simple yes or no. By asking such a question, there is a high chance for them to elaborate on their answer, giving you the opportunity to observe them even further. Some examples of open-ended questions include, how did that make you feel? Why do you think that happened to you? Why would you do that? It will take a lot of practice to become a good active listener, but remember this will greatly help when you are analyzing people. Tone and pitch of voice. Deciphering the meaning of sounds. After you've collected enough data from your target through active listening, you can then start to interpret them into usable information. The pitch of the voice. Simply listening to a person's voice will help you get to know them better. You need to carefully observe their tone, pitch, and volume of voice. Is the person saying that they are happy but the tone of their voice seems to say otherwise? If so, there is a chance of deception right there. Inconsistencies in body language. On the other hand, inconsistent tone and body language can also mean that they want to passively try to convey their emotions. In most cases, they are doing this on purpose, like they just want to send their point across in a passive-aggressive manner. If this is the case, maneuver the conversation to let the other person actually say what they mean. The volume of the voice. Is the volume of the person's voice louder than usual? Quieter than usual? There might be something wrong that the other is keeping from you. If they are using a louder voice than usual, they are trying to force their point across by talking over you. Concealed meanings. The hidden meanings behind one's words. More often than not, you should never take anybody's words at face value. Most of the time, the words that come out of a person's mouth have underlying meanings. For instance, if your best friend told you, "You're dating another football player," it might seem like a simple open-ended sentence, but you were actually being lectured on. The "another" implies that your last boyfriend was a footballer. And that did not end well for you. Now, you are dating a footballer again. In this case, you should take note of the exasperation in your friend's voice when they said those words. Also, take the context of the conversation into consideration. In the scenario above, your best friend knew about your previous failed relationship, which is why they are feeling frustrated. Spotting deception. Some of the subtle tells that you should look for when analyzing a person for deception include sudden change in speech patterns. A good indicator that someone is lying is a sudden change in their speech patterns. You must first establish a baseline by asking straightforward questions that they could answer easily. After that, take note of their normal speech patterns. A sudden shift in their speech patterns when asked a difficult question could indicate deception. Sudden changes in the person's voice. For instance, if you are asking someone about their truthfulness and their voice shifted higher, there is a chance of deception. This indicator often comes as a result of being caught off guard, especially if you blurt out a question without them being prepared for it. The sudden change in voice pitch is usually accompanied by shifting their body position. when the person shifts their eyes away when talking. Many assume that avoiding eye contact automatically turns someone into a liar. This is not always the case. It could be that they are still trying to decipher how to correctly and appropriately answer a question. However, if the eye shifting is accompanied by a higher tone and volume of voice, there might be something fishy. Suddenly stopping using I. Psychiatric researchers have found that when people want to distance themselves from their lies, they would typically avoid using the pronoun I when talking about themselves. Usually, they would refer to themselves in the third person to appear more credible and feign honesty. For instance, when one of your friends says, "This guy right here just loves comics," while pointing to themselves, that usually means that they have not read a real comic book in their life. The answers seem too elaborate and detailed. There are times when people know that they need to lie, so they would rehearse their story beforehand. Most of the time, the lies would become too rehearsed. So much so that the liar would insert a lot of unnecessary details into their story. This means you should be wary of stories that seem too practiced and unnatural. The answers seem too short. The opposite of the item above is also true when you are trying to force a liar to give up. There is something called lying by omission, wherein a person would knowingly leave out important details in their statements. Do you want to catch someone delivering their lie? Then try asking for additional details to their original story. Better yet, ask the person to retell their story, but this time in reverse order. Liars would typically trip up their stories when telling these backwards. The reason is that it is much harder to think about the progression of their stories. Can you accurately catch a liar just by their voice? If the person is a bad liar, you can probably figure out their tells and call out the lie. However, an experienced manipulator will be a harder target to crack. It is important to use more than one metric to detect a lie. Collect as much relevant data by being a careful and active listener. Make it a point to ask the appropriate questions, too. Catching verbal cues in the middle of conversations is quite difficult. However, with a lot of practice, you can become an excellent active listener that can catch even the slightest cues from the way a person speaks. Decoding human personalities. For you to use dark psychology when analyzing another person, you need to take in consideration their personality type. By knowing and understanding the personality type of someone who intends to read, you can put to use all the information you gathered about them. You will now be learning about the different human personality types and how to figure out which one any particular person belongs to. Human personalities. What's your personality type? Why do you need to figure out your target's personality? This is actually quite important when you plan on using dark psychology to analyze a person because certain personalities can either be strong against or very susceptible to different techniques. One thing to note about human personality is that it is divided into different sets and types. In this ebook, though, I will use the one that is popular and most commonly used, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI for short. Arguably, the MBTI is the most popular system used for determining a person's personality type. Employers from more than 100 countries use this system for assessing their employees. Many companies use the MBTI system to assess their employees' personalities so they can be placed in departments where they can shine. However, the most common method used for determining a person's MBTI type is by making them take a test, which you will need then to analyze later. This might seem counterintuitive when you are covertly analyzing a person, but there is a way you can make an educated guess. What is MBTI? The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator serves as a very useful tool in determining a person's personality type. After answering a set of questions, you will be assigned 4 letters taken from a pool of 8, namely E, extroversion, or I, introversion, S, sensing, or N, intuition, T, thinking, or F, feeling, J, judging, or P, perceiving. This test will assign you with 1 out of 16 possible outcomes that will then give you a simplified interpretation of your personality type. How to identify someone's MBTI type. Have you made the decision to analyze someone? Then remember how important it is to work not only quickly, but also efficiently, since there is only a limited time for this. The following method only involves looking for 6 clues, and you can likely get them within the average time spent having a conversation. Note, you will be seeing a lot of different iterations of the letters mentioned above, so it's best that you memorize their meanings, or at least have a cheat sheet handy when you are studying the different personalities. Don't worry, you'll get the hang of these letters in no time. Here are the clues that you need to look for. Starting the conversation. The first clue that you need to look for when you are trying to guess a person's personality type is if they are the one who starts the conversation. Either the person takes charge of the conversation or they let you do most of the talking. As you talk to complete strangers, it is possible to detect their introversion or extroversion based on how willing they are to talk with you. Extroverts, for instance, are usually the ones who strike up conversations even with strangers. They are also more eager to talk when someone they are unfamiliar with talks with them. Meanwhile, an indicator of the introverted personality is their tendency to speak only with those they know. It is also possible for them to talk if someone they know properly introduced them first. To guess one's personality just by observing the way they speak, you need to go at the beginning of the interaction. Observe how the person behaves at the start of your conversation. There is a possibility that you are dealing with an extrovert if they know how to talk comfortably and confidently. Going further into the conversation. You can find even more information about the other person's personality the deeper you get into the conversation. You can get the gist of their personality based on how they respond to your attempts to control the conversation. A few personality types have this tendency of avoiding topics and subject matters that cause them discomfort or do not stir their interest. People with INTP, introversion, intuition, thinking, perceiving, personalities typically avoid talking about abstract things like their feelings and emotions. On the other hand, people with intuitive feeling personalities like ENFJ, extroversion, intuition, feeling, judging, and INFJ, introversion, intuition, feeling, judging types tend to go deep in any conversation. They would maneuver past the small talk and just dive straight into the more meaningful subjects. INTJ, introversion, intuition, thinking, judging, and ENTJ, extroversion, intuition, thinking, judging, personalities, on the other hand, prefer having deep and complex conversations. They particularly enjoy discussing academic topics, and they also like partaking in debates. Observe closely where your conversation goes and the specific topics you tackled. That way, you will most likely uncover one's personality type, or at least a part of it. Discussing personal details. Although listening and observing your target is important, asking questions is also just as significant. During the entire conversation, ask a few personal questions to get to know your target deeply. Try learning more about others, and you will also get a sense of their personality in general. Ask about their hobbies or their interests. You can pick up a lot of data about someone's personality just by knowing what they like to do in their experiences. For instance, ESTP, extroversion, sensing, thinking, perceiving, people are thrill seekers. They also love talking about their latest and greatest exploits. On the other hand, if you feel radiance, empathy, and intelligence from the person, it is likely that they have an ESFJ, extroversion, sensing, feeling, judging personality. Those who have this type of personality tend to talk about their humanitarian ventures and acts of charity. You can feel that being a contributing part of society means a lot to them. Ask the person some personal questions. Whether they answer or not, you will still be getting a lot of data regarding their personality. Decoding body language. Aside from verbal cues, you can also gauge an individual's personality by reading into their body language. This means you have to learn how to differentiate the body languages shown by extroverts and introverts. For instance, It is common knowledge that social settings and functions are not that compatible with introverts. Introverts may pull their shoulders in while orienting their bodies to point away from people during conversations. They do not also like physical contact. You can usually tell who the introverts are in a public setting because they are usually the ones with crossed arms who also put some space or boundaries between them and others. Also, they typically can't make direct eye contact last long. They break it quickly by turning their gaze to the right. Extroverts are almost the polar opposites of introverts. When having a conversation, they face the other person directly. They have expressive faces and they also like using different hand gestures to state their point. You can tell who the extroverts are at a party. They are often the chatty ones who are comfortable approaching other people and opening up conversations. Extroverts are also capable of holding eye contact much longer than introverts. When they do break contact, they usually look to their left. ISTJ, ISFJ, ESTJ, and ESFJ body language cues. People with SJ, sensing judging personalities, typically have exemplary body postures. They sit and stand straight with their shoulders pulled back. Their movements usually come with a purpose. They have this sense of clarity that makes them fully aware of where they intend to go. They are also very determined to get into their desired destination quickly. There are even instances when their intent to focus on their destination and the things they do causes them to ignore what is happening in the now. When they often walk straight toward their target and will not meander unless they are trying to enjoy a talk with a companion. People who have ISTJ, introversion, sensing, thinking, judging, or ISFJ, introversion, sensing, feeling, judging personalities with a dominant introverted sensing, SI, typically have a focused gaze. This means they are less likely to look elsewhere when they are having a discussion. ISTJ and ESTJ, extroversion, sensing, thinking, judging personality types, according to researchers, have stiff upper lips when they are talking. They also make brief and subtle movements when talking with someone, usually quick nods and hand gestures. On the other hand, people with SFJ, sensing, feeling, judging personality types, ISFJ and ESFJ, tend to make elongated and more fluid movements. In addition, they have more animated facial expressions and exude warmth. They would use gentle hand gestures as a means of demonstrating their empathy. However, there are times when SFJ types would shift from being FE type, extroverted and feeling, to TI type, introverted and thinking, and vice versa. Once they get into their TI phase, they become stoic and hard to read. ISTP, ISFP, ESTP, and ESFP body language cues. Probably the first thing that you will observe in people with SP, sensing perceiving, personalities is that they appear easygoing. However, they are also quite attentive. Sensing perceivers are often vigilant of their surroundings but would nonetheless still prefer enjoying themselves. These personality types often possess the most impressive body awareness among the 16 MBTI personalities. They are also quite wary of everything that they do and its connection to other things. Even though they have long and fluid movements, they rarely bump into people and things, nor would they unsee their intended destination. ESFP, extroversion, sensing, feeling, perceiving, and ESTP, extroversion, sensing, thinking, perceiving, people commonly have quite loud body language and would often use hand gestures when they are talking. Once they start talking, you will be able to sense their feelings and emotions right away. You can detect that through their voice, facial expressions, and body language. However, once they start to analyze something, it is like a switch flipped in their heads, and they suddenly become very stoic and unreadable. If they are in deep thoughts, ESTP and ESFPs would usually look down and almost all expressions would drain out of them. INTJ, INFJ, ENTJ, and ENFJ body language cues. Those who have an NJ, intuition, judging, personality type usually look like they are always focused. For instance, INTJ, introversion, intuition, thinking, judging, or INFJ, introversion, intuition, feeling, judging, personality types often look like they are unaware of their surroundings when they are searching for hidden answers. However, it is also typical for NJ personality types to let their eyes drift down and to the side when they are thinking. NJ personality types would usually alternate between staring intently at those whom they decided to talk to and then gazing down in every conversation. This is especially evident if they are discussing serious matters. Those with NJ personality types are often more unaware of the things going on and around them compared to the sensing types. You can expect them to see the world as a place full of various concepts where they can let their imaginations run wild, so they are not particularly keen when it comes to noticing details. This is why they are more prone to tripping and hitting tables' edges and doorways. Some of them can train themselves to overcome such weaknesses, though it takes a lot of practice. ENFJ, introversion, intuition, feeling, judging, and INFJ, introversion, intuition, feeling, judging types, due to them using extroverted feeling, FE, their emotions tend to leak out more when they are talking. They also have livelier and more animated facial expressions compared to the INTJ and ENTJ, extroversion, intuition, feeling, judging types. In addition, they move their hands in a more fluid motion. However, just like the SP personalities, they would suddenly turn quiet and stoic when they are trying to analyze something. INTP, INFP, ENTP, and ENFP body language cues. People who have NP, intuition perceiving personality types, use extroverted intuition, NE thought processes. Expect their eyes to shift from one side to another if they are on the stage of gathering ideas. They may appear as if they are searching for something. However, the reality is that they tend to scour their minds to find reliable answers and ideas. Just like the other intuition personality types, those with NP personalities have little awareness of their surroundings. They would usually bump into things, especially when they are walking while thinking about something. ENFP, extroversion, intuition, feeling, perceiving, and ENTP, extroversion, intuition, thinking, perceiving personalities are often lively and very expressive of their emotions when talking. However, they do become quite stoic when thinking. An ENFP type would turn every quiet and reserved when thinking deep, while an ENTP type would still have expressive eyes. On the other hand, INFP, introversion, intuition, feeling, perceiving, and INTP, introversion, intuition, thinking, perceiving types tend to be more reserved and display a closed or defensive posture when they are thinking. This means they are somewhat skilled in putting some boundaries to prevent people from reading them. The person's attention span. You can also get a grasp of what kind of personality a person has through their attention span when you are having a conversation. In addition, this is easier compared to analyzing body language because you only have two categories: people who listen and those who don't. As you can see, one's behaviors tend to differ depending on the setting. For instance, their behavior will be different if they are just talking to one person than when they are facing a large crowd or group. Observe how your target behaves when you are both at a party or attending a large social event. Take note of how they react to the other people in the group. Are they listening to the conversations? If the person is quite talkative, expressive, and always seems to be the center of attention in any group, then they might be an ESFP type. They are usually the ones that look fidgety and uncomfortable if you talk to them personally. It would seem like they would rather be somewhere else having fun. These personality types love having conversations with a large group in the middle of the room rather than an intimate chat in a quiet corner. Figuring out the person's inclination to manipulation and persuasion. Obviously, you won't feel good upon learning that you are being manipulated to do something unwillingly. The problem is that there are specific personality types that are more prone to getting manipulated than the others. To learn if someone is prone to manipulation and persuasion, you should study the many personality types and how vulnerable they are to fall victim to dark psychology. INFJ, introversion, intuition, feeling, judging. In most cases, INFJ personalities are typically great judges of character. They are capable of telling whether someone is worth trusting. When one tries to manipulate them, alarm bells would immediately sound in their brains. INFJ people are always quite skeptical of those they don't know. The main reason is that they have seen that most people are not that trustworthy. Do you wish to analyze someone with this particular personality? Then do it very discreetly since they can easily detect and sense it. ENFJ. Extroversion, intuition, feeling, judging. An ENFJ person is great at reading other motives, and they can definitely tell when someone is trying to sway their opinions. As such, ENFJ personalities, even though they are extroverted, dislike being around those whom they deem as not worthy of their trust. However, ENFJ personality types are loving and genuine to those whom they trust, which is why they seemed like easy targets for manipulation. If you will be analyzing someone with an ENFJ personality, do it discreetly and gradually. Otherwise, they will catch what you are doing and put up their defenses. INFP. Introversion, intuition, feeling, perceiving. Younger people with INFP personalities are quite susceptible to manipulation. An INFP person is warm and empathetic, which makes them vulnerable to various forms of manipulation and deceit. They often look for the good in others, which gives them tunnel vision when it comes to spotting the bad. However, as they mature, INFPs will develop thicker skin against manipulation as they tend to learn quickly from their experiences. Analyzing a mature INF person is still very much possible. Note, though, that manipulating them is kind of tricky and challenging. ENFP. Extroversion, intuition, feeling, perceiving. An ENFP is one of the most gullible and susceptible to manipulation. However, they are also natural manipulators themselves. They have this convincing prowess, which means they can persuade or convince people to act based on their intentions. The good news is that they do not often do this for a long time. They only usually do it in jest. If an ENFP notices that you are manipulating them, they can easily turn the tables on you. INTJ. Introversion, intuition, thinking, judging. People with INTJ personalities are among the most difficult to manipulate because they are adept at sensing when people have negative motivations toward them. They have good decision-making skills. They are fond of making decisions independently and without the pressure of others. With that, you should be ready to provide them with plenty of information if you wish them to listen to you. An INTJ personality will actively avoid you if they catch you trying to read and/or manipulate them. They might even cut you out of their lives completely. People with an INTJ personality are naturally skeptical and will automatically set their defenses up when approached by someone they do not know. If you are trying to analyze someone with this personality, be very careful and deliberate with your actions. ENTJ. Extroversion, intuition, thinking, judging. An ENTJ personality type is not easy to manipulate and/or analyze. They are some of the most skeptical people and are quite observant. They would rarely put their defenses down and will always closely watch people whom they do not know that well. They prefer hanging out with those they can trust, so getting close to an ENTJ type will be difficult. INTP. Introversion, intuition, thinking, perceiving. INTP personalities are also quite skeptical of strangers, making them difficult to manipulate and analyze. They are always doubtful of people and expect those around them to take advantage of them. You will have a hard time trying to make an INTP believe in what you are saying as they do their own research rather than take your word. INTP personality types are naturally mistrusting simply because they do not like the feeling of being manipulated. ENTP. Extroversion, intuition, thinking, perceiving. You need to be careful when you encounter an ENTP personality because they are particularly good at uncovering and avoiding deception. This personality type is especially adept at detecting manipulation. They are also naturally skilled at using it. In other words, if you do not exercise caution and proper vigilance, you may end up being manipulated instead, without you being aware of it. If you deduce that your target has an ENTP personality, tread very carefully or avoid it altogether if your defenses against manipulation are not that strong yet. ISTJ. Introversion, sensing, thinking, judging. A person with an INTJ personality is also very skeptical about people they do not know well, which makes them extremely difficult to analyze and manipulate. Just like the INTP types, ISTJs are always doubtful and will always have their defenses up when interacting with others. An ISTJ person is very independent and they prefer to make their own decisions. They dislike others making their own choices for them, and they would rather avoid anyone who would dare even try. ESTJ. Introversion, sensing, thinking, judging. Analyzing or manipulating an ESTJ personality will not be easy because they can smell a manipulator from a mile away and would actively avoid them. ESTJ types are very skeptical and they dislike it when others forcefully make them change their minds about their choices. However, when they get close to an ESTJ type and gain their trust, it will be easier for them to put down their guard. ISFJ. Introversion, sensing, feeling, judging. The ISFJ consists of people who are loving and caring, making them quite susceptible to manipulation. You can even say that the ISFJs are too trusting for their own good. They put the needs of their loved ones first before their own, making them ideal targets of manipulative people, especially the ones who manage to infiltrate their social circles. They can sometimes be skeptical, but they are too empathetic that when someone fakes emotions, they would usually cave. ESFJ. Extroversion, sensing, feeling, judging. Persons with an ESFJ personality are quite good at reading emotions, which means they can usually tell if someone is worthy of their trust. Unlike the ISFJ types, those with ESFJ personalities do not fall that easily for fake emotions. They are also rarely swayed by tactics depending on emotions. However, if an ESFJ type happens to make a somewhat deep emotional connection with someone, it is possible to sway them easily. When you are analyzing someone with an ESFJ personality, you better keep your emotions in check as they can serve as massive red flags. Attempt to make a connection first before analyzing an ESFJ type. ISTP. Introversion, sensing, thinking, perceiving. One of the biggest reasons why an ISTP type is not that easy to analyze and manipulate is that they would rather spend time alone than with other people. Not only that, they are also naturally skeptical and dubious of everyone around them. Expect them to avoid interacting with those they can't seem to trust. An ISTP type of personality does not want to be in the presence of dishonest individuals. They can easily tell if one does not have good intentions toward them, and rather than arguing, they would rather just avoid people altogether. You will need to pass through difficult hurdles when you want to analyze this personality, so make sure that all your effort will be worth all the trouble you will be going through. ESTP. Extroversion, sensing, thinking, perceiving. Those with the ESTP personality type are generally independent, but sometimes they will have a hard time when a loved one is manipulating them. However, they always seem to have their guard up when it comes to talking to strangers, so you cannot expect to analyze them effectively right after you just met. You might also want to tread lightly as an ESTP will likely sense even the slightest sign of manipulation. ISFP. Introversion, sensing, feeling, perceiving. ISFP personality types are typically warm and welcoming, which makes them ideal targets for manipulation. They would actively try to avoid manipulative people, but they are often taken advantage of by the few who manage to slip through their defenses. This means that if they are manipulated by a loved one or anyone who is close to them, it would be hard for them to call them out even if they are aware of what is being done to them. They are sometimes much too gentle for their own good. ESFP. Extroversion, sensing, feeling, perceiving. An ESFP personality, just like the ISFP, is easy to manipulate by people whom they are close to. They won't even notice it. Those with EFP personalities tend to take things at face value. They would believe anything if someone within their inner circle says it. ESFPs are also laid back and relaxed. They don't like getting caught up in the negatives of life, which is why they are not as skeptical as the other personality types. Do keep in mind that although people's personalities are categorized into 16 different types here, that does not mean you can expect two people of the same type to behave in exactly the same way. The personalities discussed in this chapter are only generalizations. They are meant for use as a guide when you are analyzing a person. The MBTI system is not an exact science, but it can be a helpful guide to get a general read on someone. This just means that even though you manage to determine one's personality type, always leave room for variations in behavior. Exploring and understanding motivations. What exactly drives you? Why is the purpose for everything that you do? What inspired and motivated you to become the person you are now? What are you striving for? These are the kinds of data that you will have to collect to determine what specifically motivates and drives someone. This is where you have to combine all information you collected to make or draw a sensible conclusion. By knowing a person's motivators, you can use something that will help you in swaying interactions based on your preferred direction. This means you can use their motivators in persuading or manipulating them to do anything you want. You can also implant your own motivations if you manage to crack their defenses. Note, though, a vital function of human analysis is to analyze whether someone has good or bad intentions. You will also know if they intend to manipulate you. In this case, you are finding a person's motivations to protect yourself and the people around you. Do take note that you may not be able to find out one's exact motivation, but you can at least get the gist of what they want to happen. In any case, you will be getting enough information to defend yourself and retaliate if needed. Finding a person's motivation. It is kind of tricky and challenging to identify one's motives. Expect the process to become even more difficult if you want to make sure that they can't detect what you are doing. Do you suspect the real motive of someone who interacts with you? Then find out if they are showing the following. Looks like you are the focus of the conversation. In reality, though, they are not focusing on you. As you might already know, a manipulative person will feign interest to get you to lower your guard. They may even start asking personal questions. However, you notice that every now and then, the focus goes to them again. This should make you doubt their intentions. It could be that they intend to manipulate you or they are hiding their real motives. While talking to you, it is also possible that they are looking for ways to sway your opinion. At first, they will look like they are agreeing with your point, but this is a ploy to make you lower your guard, thus making you easier to persuade. When you lower your guard, that is when they will hook you into siding with them. They repeat themselves. Listen carefully to what they are saying. If you notice repetitive suggestions or advice, you may start doubting their motives. During a normal conversation, more details are included in the discussion, and additional context is introduced. This may prompt both parties to have a change in opinions. A healthy discourse often results in finding a mutually beneficial common ground. Meanwhile, if you are with someone who is generally manipulative, expect them to reiterate or repeat the idea they have originally presented. They do it even if you also try to add more context or information to the conversation. They will repeat their desired outcome until you are convinced, or at least until you have gotten tired and just agree to what they want. If you notice that the other person is just restating their original idea and has no intention of being convinced to the contrary, that is a sign that there is only one acceptable outcome for them. That is a red flag already because the other person is not interested in the discussion. They are indoctrinating you. They are never around when you need them. A sure sign of a manipulative person is that you are always on top of their mind when they need you. The problem is if it is you who is going to need their help, they will suddenly become inaccessible and unapproachable. This inconsistency is a sure red flag that you are dealing with someone whom you should not be. What's worse? Once you confront them, it would be as if they are a victim and you are the bad guy. They will then bully you because you let them down when they needed you. In most cases, they do this to make you feel guilty, thereby more susceptible to persuasion and manipulation. Fair-weather friends are toxic and they are worthy of suspicion. If you notice this in a person, it is best to cut ties with them as your friendship is clearly not genuine. You are only a friend when they need something from you. They exaggerate. As Queen Gertrude said, "The lady doth protest to much, methinks." This is a line in Hamlet by William Shakespeare, and it happened when Queen Gertrude responded to the rather not genuine overacting of an actress in a play made by Prince Hamlet to prove that his uncle is guilty for his father's murder. You can also apply this line in case you detect or sense someone who tries to control or manipulate you. Have you met someone who tries to overreact or display too much feelings or emotions than required? Then they are indicators that they are distracting you. They are manipulating you to focus on other things instead of what is truly happening. Manipulative people use overacting to interrupt your chain of thought and possibly startle you when they sense that you are starting to doubt their intentions. This is a tactic used by manipulators to steer you into making their feelings the focus of the conversation. This can also be used by unscrupulous people to effectively shut you down when they feel like they are losing the argument. The moment that the conversation becomes uncomfortable for them, they would raise their voice and dial up their emotions to make you back off. If your gut senses that something is wrong, you may instinctively feel like something is wrong as you continue to talk to someone. Then it could be your subconscious telling you that someone tries to control or manipulate you by making you do or believe something that you do not agree with. Ask yourself, why am I feeling uncomfortable? Is there something that this person is doing that's making me feel this way? If there is something inside you that is telling you to doubt the validity of the words that come out of someone's mouth, then that is your internal lie detector sounding the alarm. It can be quite accurate most of the time. You can sense the desperation in their voice. You can naturally sense an oversell when you see it, like a salesman who really needs another sale to hit their quota. You can sense the desperation in other people's voices quite easily. Initially, the one who is attempting to manipulate you might seem calm. However, once they notice that you are not falling into the trap, they will start to sound desperate. However, the opposite might also happen. The person might seem overbearing at first, but will then switch to a calm voice to try and convince you to believe them. Both scenarios reek of desperation. The situation feels familiar. Can you remember someone telling you the things you hear from the person in front of you right now? What are their real intentions? Does your gut make you look back at an instance when your present conversation seems to be the same as the one before? If your answer is yes, try to recall what transpired at that time. Alternatively, you can also ask yourself, what has this person done in the past to warrant myself feeling doubtful of them today? Search through your memories and past experiences for context and precedence. This will give your doubts even more strength and make you more determined to go with your gut feel. Can you ask the person directly what their motives are? Though it looks counterintuitive, you still have the option to ask someone of their real and true motives. Be discreet when doing so, though. Avoid approaching someone for this with a more confrontational stance. For instance, if you are doubting another person's motivation for helping you out of the blue, you can tell them, "Thanks a lot for helping me earlier, but may I ask why did you do that?" Don't be confrontational. It would be better to have a conversation by asking about their expected outcome. Whatever they say and the tone of their voice when saying it will serve as your indicators in determining their intentions. Regardless if the person is lying or telling the truth, you can somehow get a general idea of the person's motives based on their answer to your simple question. It is quite hard to identify someone's motivations. The challenges may worsen, especially if you consider the fact that you can't expect everyone to know about their motivations. Still, the secret to figuring out a person's motivation is to just keep it simple. Find out if their intentions toward you are good or bad. You need such information in analyzing humans to ensure that you get to protect yourself all the time. Practical applications. Using NLP to get your desired results. Finally, you are now at the point where you can put everything you learned into practice. Do take note that you have only learned about the basics of human analysis, so you should not take risks that are too big for your current skills. Commit to practicing the different techniques for analyzing people often, so you will become an expert sooner or later. Improving personal relationships. A perfect relationship is non-existent. No matter how hard you try, there will still be instances when people in a relationship, romantic or otherwise, will encounter issues and conflicts. The problem comes with the conflicts come too often and last longer than necessary. You can use the things you learned thus far to improve your personal relationships, but not necessarily to the extent that you will be manipulating other people. Do you have family problems? Then make sure to talk through these issues. However, before having a conversation, it is better to gauge the other person's emotional state. Analyze the other person. Check if the other person is in an irritable emotional state and see if they seem to be receptive or defensive. It would be best to initiate the talk once they calm down. You can also use your skills at detecting micro-expressions to gauge the mood during the conversation. Upon sensing the initial symptoms of mood changes, including widened eyes and flaring nostrils, work on de-escalating the situation. NLP may also be used in building rapport and establishing a deeper connection. For instance, you can use mirroring to match the other person's mental state and make them more receptive to your suggestions. Breaking down group behavior. What is group behavior? Group behavior is the cumulative actions, interactions, and attitudes shown by individuals when they are part of a collective or group. This covers the behaviors that appear when different personalities get together to work towards a common goal or a mutual purpose. Not all group behavior is the same. They can range from harmonious and cooperative to being full of conflict and power struggles. They are also unique group behaviors that lead to the members feeling a sense of belonging in the group, which feeds into their basic needs. This means that the group can also become an integral part of their entire being. Why do you need to read group behavior? By now, you may have already gained plenty of knowledge about reading a person like a book. This should prompt you to begin using your newly developed skill to determine the way through which specific groups operate. You will also get an idea about the problems they are presently experiencing. But why do you need to know how a group operates? If you are a member of the group, figuring out group behavior will help improve collaboration between members, improve individual decision-making, improve leadership and management, make conflict resolution easier. Are you not a group member yet, but you wish to participate? Then take time observing the group. This should help you determine its hierarchy, the politics within it, and the way to position yourself to get inside it. You can even make it so that you can rise within the ranks. How do you read group behavior? Now, it is time to put into good use the things you learned from the past chapters. Do you wish to be a member of a certain group? Then learn how you should act and whom you should approach. Here you can put your analysis skills to good use. Closely observe the expressions and body language of the members of the group. Take note if the emotions they put out differ from when they are with other members compared to their behavior when by themselves. This can help you identify if there are any conflicts within the ranks or if there is growing animosity. You also need to check the personalities of the members. Do the members of the group share or at least have the same personality types? In any setting, groups should at least have slightly diverse personalities because if everyone shares too many personalities, conflicts typically arise. This particular information is also useful in checking your suitability and compatibility within the group and how much you desire to be a member. Human analysis also helps in checking the hierarchy of the members of the group. You can use your new skill at reading body language to figure out who are the leaders and the lower rungs of the power ladder. Note that even if you belong to a group, at least one will become the member looked up by others in case they need guidance, especially in decision-making. This particular knowledge will give you a clear idea on who you should approach in case you really wish to join. Power play. Figuring out who is in charge. Do you really need to know who is in charge? The answer is yes. But why? It is simple. By knowing who is in charge, it will be easier to gain full control of the entire group. For instance, if you wish the group to accept you, the only one you have to really convince is the leader. That way you can go inside. Whatever the leader decides, the other members will most likely agree. How do you identify the leader of the group? Take time to observe every person in a room. Check the body language and expressions of people. Who are the ones that are exhibiting submissive behavioral cues? In most cases, they are the ones with lowered hands, hunched shoulders, or those who remain seated while the dominant personalities are talking to them. Once you identify the submissive ones, observe how they behave with others. If they show more submissive body language and facial expressions with a particular person, that one is the leader or the dominant personality in the room. This is the one with whom you need to curry favor to gain access to the group. Reading the room. Reading the room means you are gauging the emotions of the group. Why do you need to do this? Here are some primary reasons. Helps you become more effective at communicating. Improves business dealings. Builds rapport with more people. Promotes better engagement during public speeches. Prevents conflicts. When you are reading the room, what you are essentially doing is a quick scan of all participants' body language and emotions. Pay attention to the subtle cues that indicate the following. Attentiveness. You will, of course, want to know if your audience is paying attention. It would be hard for you to present your point if you don't capture the interest of your audience. Do a quick scan for body language cues, like fidgeting, yawning, gazing out the window, multitasking, checking their watches or phones, and more. Engagement. This will give you a bead on your audience's interest level. Some people may feign attention just to avoid offending you, but they will have a hard time faking engagement. To tell whether someone is really interested and is paying attention, find out whether they do things, like taking notes, avoiding questions, or fixing or correcting mistakes. Sentiment. This is how you are making your audience feel. Look closely at the emotions they are putting on display. This is where you can sense who agrees or disagrees with you. You can also use body language analysis to figure out if your audience is experiencing discomfort, either from the topic you are discussing or environmental factors. Reading the room will take a lot of practice, especially for reading nonverbal cues from your audience. Once you master this, though, you will notice a major improvement in your communication and leadership skills. You will also be able to increase your charisma. All these skills combined are crucial in persuading the whole group with ease. Neuro-linguistic programming. Like-minded control, except it isn't. Observing people's body language and nonverbal cues are great, but how do you use them? Once you have collected information and cues, you can start using neuro-linguistic programming. This is said to be effective in influencing others to do things in accordance to your expectations and wishes. What is NLP? Without going through too many specifics, neuro-linguistic programming is a psychological approach involving analyzing strategies and applying the thoughts and behavior of people, and then applying techniques to reach a specific goal or target. In general, it involves guiding someone subtly so they will perform certain things. Expect them to do it without getting alerted to the fact. This means you will be taking all the information that you gained from your observations and analysis and then coming up with a strategy to use to persuade a person or group towards your intended goal. Common NLP techniques. There are lots of NLP techniques, but we will focus mainly on the ones used more commonly and whose concepts are easier to grasp. Using a person's motivations against them. Once you manage to determine a person's motivations, you can use that to persuade them to do what you want, essentially. For instance, let's say you are planning to sell your car and you have already received some inquiries. You can use your skills to persuade someone to finally decide to buy it. You can use your observations and analysis to find out what the person's motivations are. Engage in a light conversation and take note of all the cues they put out. If they briefly mention that they have a young child, you can casually mention the safety rating of your vehicle and that you bought it because there is more than enough room in the back seat for a rear-facing child seat. The other person may not notice it, but you just used their connection with their young child to trigger emotions within them, and that you have successfully planted the idea that your car is great for families. Restricting choices. In the NLP scene, this is called embedded commands. Restricting choices is when you ask the other person a seemingly innocent question, but the truth is that you limited the number of possible answers. This technique gives the other person the illusion of choice when you already made the decision and that you were only persuading them to agree with you. For instance, let's say you went out with a group of your friends for dinner. You then asked the group, "What do you guys want to eat? Chicken or fish?" You see what you did there? Your friends that you are asking them where they want to eat, but they haven't noticed that you limited the options to just 2. This can make you an effective leader because you led the group into an acceptable decision that everyone agreed upon without that much effort. Using hierarchy values. Let's go back to the motivations of people. When you are looking for a person's motives, you will actually uncover their needs. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, physiological needs are the most important, followed by safety and security, love and belonging, self-esteem, and finally, self-actualization. By determining the exact motivation of someone and finding its rank in the hierarchy, this information will be useful in terms of persuading them to do something. For instance, let's say you were in a club but suddenly the bouncer asks you to step outside for purportedly breaking a rule. However, it is unclear what type of rule you broke. You can deduce that the motive or need of the bouncer at the time is to get your compliance, which falls under the self-esteem tier of the hierarchy. Before that need is achieved, the tiers below it need to be satisfied first. You can start with the safety and security stage. Show the bouncer that you don't want any trouble and show no aggression. This will assure the bouncer that you are not a threat to his or other people's safety. This will give him a reason to trust you and actually listen. With that, you will gain an opening, which will let you present your ideas to him that will most likely persuade him that you can stay. Mirroring. This is when you observe the other's body language and then copy it. When it is your turn to talk, subtly repeat the other's gestures and tone of voice while you speak. This can help you establish a sense of familiarity and rapport between the two parties. For instance, when you notice the other likes to use hand gestures quite a bit, you can try to mimic their actions when you are the one talking. However, it should be done subtly and unnoticeably. Do the same hand gestures but slightly, and just elevate your hands up a bit to waist level. Once the other person is feeling comfortable in your conversation, you can then introduce slight changes until the other is mirroring you. This will allow you to guide the other to do whatever you like. Creating positive connections. This is the process of creating associations between positive emotions and a particular trigger. For instance, you can somewhat train a person to instantly feel positive by tapping their shoulder as you give them praise whenever they do a great job. Do this enough times, and they will associate that tap on the shoulder with a positive emotion. That way, they will feel compelled to smile and feel positive every time. Conclusion. The process of analyzing people can be a tough and tricky process, especially if you haven't done it before. You have to monitor a lot of things. These include subtle body language, tone of voice, emotions, and any other subtle details that will help you read and analyze someone. Just simply taking note of the body language and facial expressions of someone is usually enough to learn more about them. Details like their current emotional state, behavior, personality, and even their motivation should also be scrutinized. Hopefully, this book helped you learn and understand how you can analyze people using the information you collected about them. You may even find this knowledge useful in persuading or manipulating people. Now that you know how to analyze people, you have to commit to using this ability wisely and responsibly. Never use it irresponsibly and for the bad of others. As much as possible, use the tips and techniques for analyzing people that you have learned here only when it is really necessary.
We appreciate you tuning in to one of our captivating audiobooks. For more immersive experiences, here is another audiobook we're certain you'll enjoy. Don't forget to show your support by liking this video, sharing what you loved about this audiobook in the comments section below, and subscribing for more captivating audiobooks like this. Thanks for being a part of our audiobook community.